The Big 12 experience, conference expansion. What's the next domino to fall on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Best Ball Mania is live with $15 million in prizes. Sign up today using the promo code TCESGPN to claim your special pick and first-time deposit offer up to $250 in bonus cash. And Underdog Fantasy promo code TCESGPN. And we're also brought to you by those Royal Retros. Royal Retros has jerseys, t-shirts, hats, jackets, sweatshirts, got it all from all your old school teams that you love. Use the promo code SGPN for 10% off your order today. That's code SGPN, Royal Retros today. Welcome, everybody, to the Big 12 College Experience, part of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Thursday, May the 9th. Go check out our May the 7th video where we broke down our preseason rankings. Controversy. It's as open as it ever will be. Hell, we may even get Rambling Rush's power rankings here at the end of the show. But hey, if you're wondering who you're listening to, I am Moneyline Mac, a.k.a. the former video coordinator for Bob Huggins and Frank Martin. And joining me on the Big 12, because we're talking Big 12 football, basketball, baseball, universities, expansion. I don't know what we're talking, but hey, he was a guy born in Provo, Utah. He lives he's got family in Ames, Iowa. He lives in Morgantown, West Virginia, a walking contradiction. He knows expansion. Rambling Rush, co-host of the Ryan Rush Show. What's up, Rush?
Yeah, the Ryan and Rush Show takes on the Big 12 podcast. Dude, it's that interesting time of the year, storyline time of the year when these moves start getting made and all these conferences are planning 5 years in advance. And well, we live in interesting times where a conference isn't defined by its geography anymore, but history is cyclical. You'll probably get divisions within those conferences, and then those divisions will come to conferences. And then here we are back from the top all over again. But until then, football's the unicorn, right? It's basketball, all these other sports, maybe they follow football's lead, but football's a whole different animal from everything else.
Oh, it completely is. Football drives the engine. Hopefully, and real quick, we're not one of those podcasts that just wants to do clickbait titles and stuff. This is going to be probably our one episode on expansion. I feel like it is warranted. This usually ends up being around where expansion really gets some heat. I know last year kind of was late July, early August when Colorado and those schools made the move to the Big 12, Oregon and Washington to the Big 10. So, yeah, we wanted to get ahead of it before we dive completely into football, where we're actually talking X's and O's, who's going to win the conference like we did the other day with our preseason power rankings 1 through 16. Real quick, Rush, let's recap how we got here. So those watching on youtube.com/the college experience, we have the old logos on because the fiscal year has not ended. We have the new graphic ready. We're waiting for the final baseball game to be finished up so that we can officially transition into the new Big 16. Texas, horns down. If those watching it see it at the bottom, the horns are always down all the way to the SEC. Oklahoma going to the SEC. They were the first dominoes to fall on this round of expansion. Then USC and UCLA jumped to the Big 10. Then you fast forward another summer, Colorado, Arizona State, and the Utah Utes. Yes, Utah Utes are part of the Big 12. They come into the Big 12 and now are becoming the Big 16. And then that ended up being Oregon and Washington going to the Big 10 from the Pac-12, which all of a sudden became the Pac-2 and, well, no longer a conference because Oregon State and Washington State are on their own. And, so unfortunately the Pac-2 is no longer. So, Rush, thoughts on just the last couple of years of how we got here? And before we dive into speculation on where we think the next dominoes could fall.
Well, I think it is relevant that we're talking about this on the Big 12 because I think the Big 12 has been the most affected conference by this and was kind of the first of all of this to fall with Texas and Oklahoma. Obviously, the Big 12 went from 10 teams to 16 teams. And then you want to go back even further, then you start talking Nebraska and Colorado the first. It seems like Big 12's kind of been the center of conference changes, expansions, decline, et cetera, et cetera. Losing Texas and Oklahoma, whether, how much shit we like to talk against them, give them a hard time, horns down, all that sort of thing, it does hurt the pocketbook, right? The Big 12 has done a good job of adjusting, bringing in, you lose those two schools, but bring in 8 new schools, one of them being a former member in Colorado. Obviously, with bringing in those members and what Oregon and Washington's done as well, you've gotten rid of a conference. So in terms of with this playoff expansion and where we're going from here, theoretically, another Big 12 team or 2 can get added to the playoffs. So there is money to be made up over there. But as I said to start the show, and we've talked about it, these conferences are no longer bound by geography, which is what it is. And it's going to be the question is what conference falls next, because I think the eventuality of this is right. We're going to get these 2 conferences, whether they're called the SEC and Big Ten. I guess that's kind of what we're calling it right now is placeholders. We'll see where that lines up there. Or I mean, there's talks now, right, that the power is going to totally break off from the group of 5. I mean, because football right now is just we're in the Wild West. This is the Wild West of times, and it's nuts, and it is kind of sad in a way too. I'm not gonna lie.
It definitely is. Yeah,
it's like it's honestly, I feel like it's kind of gotten a little too far. But personally, the team I grew up cheering for as a child, BYU, and the team I love now and live in Morgantown, and bringing the Holy War to the Big 12 again. I mean, there are good parts of it, right? We got the Holy War back. Hopefully we'll get to it here in a second. When the ACC falls, we get the Backyard Brawl back too. So, maybe there are some pros to this as well.
Definitely. And I totally forgot the other dominoes that fell after Texas and Oklahoma because I'm just used to them being in the league now.
Yeah.
BYU, UCF, Cincinnati, Houston became active members of the Big 12 as of July 1st of 2023. I completely skipped over them because they're ingrained to me that they're already in the league. I was thinking about the newest 4 members that were coming in. But we'll talk about who could be the next set of newcomers that could be coming to the Big 12 or other leagues on the other side. But first, well, if you're a hardcore baseball fan or a degenerate or both, you're probably watching the show for that reason, and you're looking for some afternoon action, well, either way, you'll want to make sure you're subscribed to the MLB Gambling Podcast wherever you get your podcast today. Okay, back to expansion talk. So, yes, Rush mentioned it. We can even rewind even farther back. Colorado and Nebraska leave the league. It comes full circle. Missouri, Texas A&M. Like Colorado signifies what expansion is. They leave the league to go to Pac-12. Now they're coming back to the Big 12. And then West Virginia and TCU were added in 2012. And that's kind of was quiet for a little bit there, and then it really ramped up here over the last couple years. And we've added 8 schools, lose Texas, Oklahoma. But I think we do agree that our league is in a pretty good spot for the most part. This is the Big 12 college experience. We are going to say we because it's our favorite league, and it's the league of the middle class, as Rush likes to say. But Rush, I'll hand it to you. We hinted at the ACC. I think that's the inevitable of when it's going to happen. The grant of rights 2036, although it sounds like 26. Could be a area where we're looking for some expansion and some dominoes to fall. What do you think will be the first domino to fall next from the ACC?
So before we get to that, I just don't want to look past this point because you brought it up and it's very important, right? I like to say the Big 12 is the league of the middle class. It's the league of the most parity. Even Colby says it's the most fun league. And I think the Big 12 and Yormark need to continue to hone in on that and promote that. Like basketball, we're putting basketball to the side. This is a football conversation because football is a whole separate animal from the other sports. So this is basically a football conversation that we're having right now, right? And with that being said, you got to embrace that. And I think they're doing, and I think they're trying to. And if you want to make this league to continue to be successful, don't pretend like you're something that's not. Like, oh, we can get it at, we have some of the best teams there. No, you don't have Texas and Oklahoma anymore. I'm not saying you're not going to have the TCU year or something like that, where you have a Big 12 team that is really good and they do have a chance to compete. That is absolutely on the table, but just roll with hey, we're going to be the most fun league. We're going to be the parity league. We're going to be the league that beats each other up. Any team can beat any team any Saturday. And I think you can be very successful with that. And I think you can, obviously, then we go into the ACC conversation of, why is the ACC in trouble right now? Well, they didn't learn from what the Pac-12 did. And like we talked about when we did the Pac-12 funeral episode, right? Is the Pac-12 and the ACC, you got those coastal elites on each side that think, oh, Duke basketball will still get us, anything that we want, right? And it's just not true anymore. Football runs everything at the end of the day. You have ACC's, coaches leaving to go to other places, and, it happens. But the writing is on the wall for the ACC. And the problem with the ACC is they're not doing anything to fix their brand or make their brand better, like at least the Big 12 is. Like, hey, we're going to have the most fun. We're bringing the Holy War back. We're going to do these things. There are a couple gripes with the Big 12, and we'll get to that in the later episode where they can do better, especially around their scheduling. However, I think because of the position the ACC's in, you have Florida State. They're definitely going to the SEC. Clemson's going to go to the SEC. I know they've talked, Big Ten. Those schools are going to the SEC. Why wouldn't they?
They're an SEC country.
Of course. Why wouldn't they? I think the Southern schools, and then from there, you just have a domino effect because your two biggest brands are leaving. Like, what do you have left? North Carolina, that's for some reason that seems like a Big Ten school. I think the Big 12, I think the big ones are going to be Pitt. We've talked about this. North Carolina State, Louisville, and Virginia Tech. I know people have talked about somewhere in the Virginia legislature that UVA and Virginia Tech have to stick together, but trust me, any law can be unwritten like that. Like, once they realize, Virginia Tech can make more money in the Big 12, going back to that rivalry with West Virginia and, that sort of thing, and UVA can do well in the Big 10, they'll have no problem splitting up the schools. If money is going to increase, that'll get split up like that. But I think what you're going to see is, because, like I said, is the ACC is on a pedestal. They're not going to do anything to get better. They think basketball, and we love college basketball. I don't have to tell you twice about it, but college basketball is not bringing in the money. It's football, football, football. And Duke football is not bringing in money. Duke basketball is that, and you can't, you can't rely on these old 90s, 2000s ACC great basketball teams to keep it going. So that's why the ACC is going to fall. I think from there, and you kind of see this, right? Traditionally, it's different depending on the state, but for the most part, the state schools are kind of more those engineering type schools, kind of more those like conservative blue collar type schools. Those are going to be the ones that make kind of the Big 12 make sense for the Big 12. And then the more like the UNC, like University of North Carolina, the UVA, the liberal arts schools. You're going to see those will make the Big 10 jump. And then like the Clemsons, the Florida States, academics, right? And, anywhere else kind of in that SEC country, or it's all about football, football, football. Those are the ones that will make the SEC jump. I think the question then becomes, do you ever, because I heard Texas A&M's still not happy, obviously, with Texas joining the SEC. And there is rumors that Texas A&M could switch to the Big 10, which
that makes sense.
That would be interesting. But that would be interesting, right? When you start seeing SEC and Big 10 schools flipping for each other.
Well, I mean, Miami's a high academic school. Well, does Miami end up in the Big 10, where the Big 10 wants to dip into that state of Florida, dip into the state of Texas? I know that's technically SEC country, but I don't know. It's a dick measuring contest between those two right now. The SEC is not going to change. They're not going to go outside of their Southeastern Conference brand. That's one thing. I'm not a big SEC guy, but I respect that they football is meant to be played on Saturdays in those states. They
Of
don't
course.
even know that they don't even know there's an NFL. It's football's on Saturday.
Why do you think the AFC South and NFC South are like forgotten
Right.
about?
You're right.
Yeah, exactly.
You're right. And Texas and Oklahoma do fit that brand because those fan bases are psycho. I could see Miami being more of a Big Ten school, as well as North Carolina. And A&M even could be Big Ten, like you said, just if they want to get away from Texas because they want to be – because the thing that was attractive for them to go to the SEC was we want to be the only school in the state of Texas in the Big 12. Well, fast forward, and the SEC said, we're not going to take Texas. Well, fast forward, they take Texas. So now it's like, well, what the fuck, man? What was that whole thing 10 years ago where we're going to be the only school in the state of Texas? Now it just becomes a recruiting struggle. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. Real quick, let me get us paid, and then we'll talk about who our preference is. You kind of hinted at the teams. I think we agree on most teams. But Underdog Fantasy playoffs are here, and our Underdog Fantasy wants to make things a lot more interesting. Get on over there and get down on the NBA playoffs with Underdog Fantasy. You could stack winners on top of winners, 3-to-1 payouts, 5-to-1 payouts, 7-to-1 payouts. Underdog is available in 30-plus states, including California, Texas, and Canada. And they also just lost their champions, player versus player format in Florida. Sign up today using the promo code with us, TCESGPN, to claim your special pick and first-time deposit offer up to $100 or $250 in bonus cash. Underdog Fantasy promo code TCESGPN. All righty, we are back on the Big 12 College Experience, talking expansion, some next dominoes to fall. I want to go back to the ACC a little bit because I do agree that it does kind of give me deja vu of the Pac-12, and I know that they had a good March Madness, but that's not sustainable.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't move the needle either. And odds are they keep getting as little amount of teams with the way that they're investing in their coaches, their facilities, their programs. They're going to get less and less and less because you talk about the historical basketball brands of the ACC. Duke was Coach K. Coach K is not there anymore. They're still Duke in a way, but North Carolina doesn't have Roy Williams. Syracuse doesn't have Jim Boeheim. So they're losing all the big names that built those programs into what they are. They still have good brands at basketball, but it doesn't move the needle. And then football is just as uninspiring as any league in America. And as much as I thought Florida State did get screwed this year going undefeated, they told you what they thought of the ACC, leaving out the ACC champion that went undefeated this year, 13-0, did everything that they were asked to. And yes, the quarterback was hurt, but at the same time, I don't think they would have left the Big 12 champion out if the
no, they wouldn't have.
Yeah, because it's a better league top to bottom and more parity. There's just so many weak leagues or weak teams in the ACC. So what do you think the first team to go non-SEC, non-Big 10 will be in from the ACC to the Big 12? That's what I'm asking.
I think it's going to be kind of like what we just saw this past year, where it's almost maybe there's one, but the others are right behind it. It's kind of like everything's sorted out behind the scenes and then go. But if what's the first team to jump to,
or do they all go in as one, kind of like they did?
I think that's what's going to happen.
With the four corner schools of the Pac-12.
Basically.
Yeah.
Basically. It's. I think that's where we're headed. If there's one, we talked about it. Virginia Tech might have a little bit more hurdles. I could see Louisville kind of being the first, because don't forget, Louisville and West Virginia competed kind of there for a second for that last Big 12 spot. Yeah, Cincinnati too. Obviously, they're already in that. I could see Louisville kind of being the first, but then from there, then Pitt, then NC State, then Virginia. Virginia Tech might be the last, not because they don't want to be here, but they may have their own things to figure out and how they do UVA and that sort of thing. But I think those are the four schools, and those are the four schools that make sense. I don't know if I even really want any other schools besides those four joining the Big 12.
What about Syracuse with the New York market? Or Boston College has just been bad for so fucking long. I know they're in the Boston
That's the
area,
con-
New England area, but it's like at some point you got to win some ball games.
I say this like because like I'm wearing like my family's from New England. Like they don't care about college football up there. They don't.
Yeah.
That's kind of like they do, but they don't. Like that's more basketball territory. Like I think the ACC is going to become kind of what the Big East is now, where it's a basketball conference. And I think that's what you're going to see too. You may see like a North Carolina join the Big Ten, but still be like ACC for basketball. Like football's about to do a total split here, where your conference in football is not going to necessarily reflect what your other sports are doing. I think these football teams are going to become companies of the school. I think they don't want to adhere by Title IX or any of that stuff. I think it's going to be a total separate break. I think they're going to break from these group of 5 schools. I think the question is whatever this super conference is going to be, and it may take still a couple seconds to get there. And this is one way, right? The ACC needs to fold, and then it's the Big 12, Big 10, SEC. But from there, then the question becomes, okay, the Big 12 has 20 teams. Well, who's the Big 10 and SEC going to take from there? And you don't be surprised. SEC has looked into West Virginia. That's probably the furthest north they would go. The Big 10 wants Kansas. Like, I will not, because kind of what they did with Nebraska, I will not be surprised if in a couple years from now, Kansas is part of the Big 10.
If
I
they
hate
had
it,
a better
but it
football program, I would agree. Their football product just doesn't move the needle, though.
I mean, does Indiana's football product move the needle?
No, but they're just they're ingrained in the Big Ten. Although I will be interested to see if they start kicking some of these members out. It's like, hey,
That's another thing.
You're not pulling your fucking weight, Rutgers. Get the fuck out.
Because if you want to make, let's say, the best like 64 power conference, you can't put Vanderbilt in there. You can't put you can't. Northwestern's an interesting. Well, they just beat. Speaking of Utah, they just beat Utah in a bowl game. So, but I don't know. I don't know what you do when you start potentially kicking some of these teams out. All I know is the Big 12 should be all right, but they need to outlast the ACC here and figure out a way to be part of that Super League. If they do that, which is they're very capable of doing, they'll be all right.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm Ohio State or Michigan or Oregon now and Penn State in the Big Ten or in the SEC, I'm Georgia, Alabama, or any of those big brands, and I'm like, why are we sharing the same? Why do we get the same cut as Northwestern? Why do we get the same cut as Vanderbilt? They're not moving the needle. They're not doing anything for us other than, if anything, holding us back. So that it'll be interesting to see if they do basically kick some teams to the curb. I don't know how that works. I don't think anybody really knows how any of this works. I think they're still trying to figure it out as they go. The one thing they have made it clear is that they're gonna split from the G5. That's definitely happening. The way that they've talked about that top 75 league or whatever, and
I think it's either going to be 80 or 64.
80 or 60. It would make sense.
Because 80 you don't have to kick anyone out. Just like March Madness.
Yeah.
Until they expand that.
Yeah. It sucks. I mean, I don't like it. Although they are playing different sports in a way, and with the amount of resources and the discrepancy and the TV money that's coming into each and every one of these SEC and Big Ten schools. But I think the Big 10 or the Big 12 is in good standing. They need to get a couple more, especially on the East Coast. They need Louisville, they need Pitt, they need NC State, and then who did we say our fourth was from the ACC?
Louisville, Pitt, Virginia Tech.
Virginia Tech, yeah. Because those all fit the Big 12 brand where they have history in their program. As much as I hate Pitt, you hate Pitt, West Virginia hates Pitt. We want Pitt in the Big 12 as much as anybody.
Play them every year.
Yeah, backyard brawl. I want Louisville. West Virginia and Cincinnati have played Louisville for years and years. That would ignite that old Big East rivalry. NC State, would be a little bit of an outlier, but their fan base is rowdy, just and loyal, just like these other Big 12 schools. Raleigh's a fun town. You tap into that network, and then Virginia Tech, of course, with West Virginia, those old rivalries and that fan base that's a Big 12 fan base. That they live and breathe the Hokies there in a college town, so they would fit the identity of the middle class league, and I hope that's where the Big 12 ends up going, which ends up being what, 20 teams?
Yeah, that would put us at 20.
If we went outside the ACC, Rush, who would you look at?
Well, that's another conversation too, is do we need to start looking at some of these group of fives, especially if they end up splitting? The question then from there becomes, do we want to look at basketball only members as opposed to football? I think if you're going to expand beyond 20 teams, you're going to start getting some basketball only members. But in terms of group of five members, people have always talked about Memphis. I don't know how I feel about that. You do have the FedEx and, Memphis. It definitely adds a brand there. To me, that always seemed more of like a basketball decision than it was a football decision. But Memphis, a lot of people like. I don't know if you want to expand Florida with South Florida. It's another school you could potentially consider. What do you have? Those are the two I can kind of think of that people have talked about.
I mean, I want Wazoo and Oregon State, but I don't think that they're going to go that. They had the chance to go that route this time around. What about a San Diego State? Tap into the California market with.
Dude, I love San Diego State on paper. However, I actually went to a game at San Diego State. They don't give a fuck about football. They don't care.
They don't care
at all. Oh, they're awesome at basketball. Basketball is a different sport. Well, that's what I'm saying, and that's where we're kind of getting at. Is I think if we start going above these 20 teams, we're now talking about basketball members.
Well, I'll tell you one, and this is definitely benefits basketball. They're the two-time defending champs. Why can't UConn do what Kansas is doing in football? Get the right coach in with the money and get UConn to a respectable like they were with Randy.
Because they don't care. That's what I was saying about New England in that area. They don't care.
If I'm gonna take a Northeast team, I'm taking UConn over Syracuse and Boston College because you get that basketball brand with it.
Yeah, I don't. I just, as you know, it comes down to the almighty dollar. I don't know the difference between bringing UConn in as a basketball brand versus bringing a Syracuse in as a football and basketball brand and the monetary difference there. But no, I get what you're saying. I put money to the side. Yeah, you're probably right. I think that's just what it comes down to. If you're going more than 20 teams, you start bringing in basketball. But going back to the whole point of this is football is going to split off anyway. So you might need to make separate basketball and football decisions. And I think that's what we're coming to as well, because what's going to happen is, okay, football breaks off. They're not part of the NCAA anymore. There's a big super conference with a commissioner and salary cap and basically NFL junior. Then the March Madness is not going to be too far behind that and breaking off and being the March Madness League, basically NBA junior. And then you're really going to have the NCAA basically be Olympic sports. And honestly, that might diminish too, because a lot of these sports rely on football bringing in money to subsidize their sport. And that's another thing people don't get too. So you may just start, the NCAA, I mean, this is all their fault. I mean, they've done it to themselves and now we're overcompensating the completely other way. So NCAA may not even be a thing in 20 years from now, maybe 10.
That part might not be a bad thing because they've done a fucking horrible job. You know what? The more and more I think about it, and I'll jump right on what you just said. History has a way of correcting itself.
Mm-hmm.
The way and karma has a way of coming back around. I could see Oregon State and Wazoo actually getting into the Big 12 eventually. Kind of like BYU that waited forever. Kind of like Houston, where maybe they go to the group of five here, they in the Mountain West, and they're dominant and they get to go to the playoff multiple times because they continue the momentum of the program, especially Oregon State over the last couple of years, and they're on that national stage from the group of five level. I think that could be the ticket for Oregon State to get back to the Power Five, is just dominate at the group of five level and then have success in the playoff.
Potentially. The difference is what BYU did, and they did a really good job with this, is BYU decided to go independent because Oregon
True.
State and Washington State are still part of the Pac-2, whatever that technically is. Even though they had the agreement to play the Mountain West, they are, still kind of, joint at the hip, so to say. BYU did a good job of, one, going independent. Two, because they were independent, they worked out with ESPN their own media rights. And three, BYU always intended like, hey, we may be independent, but our goal is to play a power schedule. So what I think so basically BYU kind of created the path there. And you're right, Ryan. Oregon State and Washington State have the opportunity to do that. But I think they have to kind of go independent themselves. Maybe they agree to play each other. Maybe you play a couple Mountain West opponents, but they should be, if I'm Oregon State, Washington State, I'm lighting up. I'm hitting hard that Thursday, Friday night slot. BYU did that, played a lot of Friday night games, and I'm playing like just picking off team, like playing Michigan State, just pick off power teams, add some Mountain West teams in there, an FCS opponent. And then that gradual, get a couple big victories in there, and then that'll lead them to joining the conference like a Big 12. But I think they kind of have to go through that. They're playing a little bit of that half in, half out right now, and they may just
Notre
have
Dame
to,
model.
The Notre Dame model, but they don't have the history nor prestige that Notre Dame has. And speaking of Notre Dame, they got to be bound for the Big 10, right?
Yeah, speaking of, we didn't talk about Notre Dame. Notre Dame is the one that ended up fucking the ACC. They're the ones that have kind of pulled the strings behind closed door, and they won't even commit to the ACC. They're the ones that wanted Cal and Stanford. I forgot Cal and Stanford in our breakdown of how we got
the
here.
ACC.
Cal and Stanford.
SMU too. SMU's not even taking money. Yeah, it's maybe ACC really shot themselves.
SMU could be in the Big 12 in a couple years.
That
if
area,
they go
yeah,
in and have success. I mean, they're already in the
that'd be nuts.
Yeah, maybe honestly, if they really want to get into California, they don't fit the brand, but Stanford and Cal, I would not be fans of the move, but if they wanted money, I guess Stanford and Cal's brands still do exist to a certain degree.
Stanford would join like the Big 10 with Notre Dame and play in there. Cal, screw Cal. I think you can leave Cal out of this whole super whatever league, power league. I don't think Cal's kind of like the Vanderbilt.
Yeah, they fit the Big 12 more than Stanford does, though. Stanford.
Dude, you're talking about Cal Berkeley. You're talking about protest man, going against like
true
out here in West Virginia.
It would be very that. I agree. I don't want Cal in the Big 12. I don't think that they're the best fit.
If you want a Big 12, you need to look at like San Diego State wasn't bad, but I've just personally been there and they don't care. Maybe like a Fresno State. You need one of those kind of state, like more of that conservative type. And I don't even mean fully politically, but people know what I mean. That if you want to get there, honestly, California may not even be the market to go after. It's not. The college football doesn't. Besides USC, like look at UCLA. That's the second biggest brand there, and that stadium's empty every freaking time they play. The Big 10, like Ohio State, Michigan, all these schools are going to take over that stadium. USC has someone. They're only there when USC's good. That's the only brand in California that's going to move. Maybe Stanford when they have a good season, but beyond that, like, dude, they don't care. There's so much other stuff going on in LA and those surrounding areas. They don't care. They don't care.
That's why I like the idea of Oregon State and Wazoo if they do play their cards right back down the road, because they do care at those places. They pack their stadiums. Of course. That's life or death for those programs in those towns, Pullman and Corvallis. So I don't know. I'm pulling for it. I really was hoping that they would be a part of it, but I understand right now maybe the timing's not right. But yeah, like I said, we got our expansion talk out. It's May the 9th, so you get your expansion talk out of the way, because once we start playing games, we're not talking any of this expansion nonsense. So, all right, Rush, any final thoughts on expansion other than go Big 12?
Go Big 12.
Go Big 12. We'll be here every step of the way. Hopefully we don't have too much expansion talk this summer. Hopefully it's more team previews, more breaking down who's going to win the games on Labor Day weekend, who's going to win the Big 12 in Arlington at Cowboy Stadium come December, all the other leagues as well. Go check out the college football experience. Colby will start his team previews here soon. Go check out the FCS experience as well, breaking it down, all those great conferences. Hey, the more and more they keep pulling away, the more and more I like the group of 5 in FCS. So
I might become an FCS fan.
Yeah, I'm all in on the FCS. I'm going to get more into FCS than I ever have this year. And of course, like and subscribe to Big 12 experience because we're the best league in the land, baby. League of the middle class. And go check out the Ryan and Rush show with Rush and I covering West Virginia sports year round. And check out the college basketball experience later tonight. Be breaking down some coaching rankings, broke down the portal with Ethan Bach last night. Some winners, losers are here every other night. And college baseball experience with Noah Beanick. Omaha's right around the corner. That's all I got, Rush. Always a pleasure talking to you all. Go Big 12. He's at Rambling Rush. I'm at Moneyline Mac. We are the Big 12 College Experience, League of the Middle Class, and we are out of here.